Hello and welcome to another edition of Digital by Design. Today I'm really excited because, like I said, when we talk about digital dentistry as a whole, I cannot not have David Bolen, better known as Bolen. Bolen, how you doing, brother?
It's good to be here. Every time I come to this lab, Frank, you've got something new.
Isn't it cool?
And this is impressive.
It is.
It's like a whole nother wing, a whole nother addition. What's the next thing Frank's going to do?
Yeah.
And I heard about it, and I had to get out here and see it. And
Yeah, because you wouldn't come to California because you're from Texas. You know what you think about us Californians.
Well, I don't say it out loud.
Exactly.
Right.
Because you tell me on the phone all the time.
All the time.
When's that earthquake coming?
That's right. I figured you'd be in Hawaii by now.
But now, dude, it's a pleasure to have you here because, like I said, to be honest with you, like even my journey in digital dentistry, there's a lot of memories and a lot of things that we've shared together, throughout the years and stuff. And I always thought that your story was one of the best, right? Because in my opinion, when I first met you and you sort of came into the dental world, right? You knew dental. Why? Like, how did you know dental?
Well, first and foremost, I was raised in a dental clinic. My dad is in practice for 38, 40 years. And so, but that's just what he did. It's very different than, say, your business here, where everyone in the family has, a piece of this business as far as their roles and responsibilities. For me, it was, that's where I went as a little kid after school and hung out with him until on certain days where he'd bring me home and I'd walk in and, the whole staff was hugging me and that's just what I did. I'd go to the back kitchen and grab a juice box or go sit in his office and play games or whatever it is I did. So, but I never did pay attention to what was going on, within those walls of that business. And then, you fast forward to, till I'm probably in my early 30s and I get an opportunity to go work for Sirona. And at that time, it's a funny story because I didn't know anything about the industry. And, I recall that probably the same week that my dad literally boxed up his models, his study models, his books, his diplomas, right, everything. And he came home and was essentially, was finished. He had sold it. He sold the practice, and I called him that week, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm getting in my car and I'm driving to Austin, which is 5-6 hours from where I live." And he goes, "Why are you coming here?" And I said, "I need you to teach me everything you can about dentistry in the next 2 days, because I'm flying to Charlotte and I have an interview with Sirona." And at that time, Sirona was the king of CAD CAM. Yep. Certainly chairside still is today, definitely. Right? And so, that was exciting for him because nobody in our family was kind of going down that path of, within this industry. And so that's what we did. But, I've got a chance to look back now and I can reflect on how I got started in this business. And it was probably, it was an incredible blessing, I would say, that I didn't know anything about dentistry, because that actually led me to form relationships with you, with Jay, with Trey, with Suris, with those guys, because I depended on you guys to help me and teach me the business, because I honestly didn't have a whole lot of other choice, because I didn't know the true, foundation of dentistry.
And that's something that's really cool, because if we go back, there's so many pieces of this story that you just said that still need to get added, right? Because there's a couple things, right? Thing number one, right? Your dad's practice was sold to Dr. Graves, right?
Dr. Graves, yes.
Dr. Graves, yes.
Yes,
she's one of my clients. She's actually one of our doctors, one of our Sarah doctors.
She's great.
And that was really cool because, all of a sudden, we met. Next thing I know, I'm working with, whoever, bought the place, number one. Number two, one thing that I really, when we first met and you were crossing over, you were from AT&T, wasn't it? AT&T?
Yeah, and that was hilarious because, I interviewed in Charlotte, and Tom Husing, who we all know and love and respect, and I owe a lot of my success to him giving me that first opportunity. But when I was interviewing, I had been doing from the previous 5 or 6 years, probably one of the most painful sales gigs you could ever imagine. And I was going door to door to businesses selling yellow page ads in the phone book.
Dude,
and it was brutal. It was brutal. And I mean, I would leave for weeks at a time to go to other cities, stay in hotels, selling the ads for that next year's phone book. And so when I interviewed with him and he was looking at, he was going through my, my folder that I had prepared for him, and he just kind of looks at me and laughs, and he says, well, if you can sell yellow page ads, you can certainly sell this. He goes, because that's got to be brutal, right? And so, they gave me a start. I think I was the first person on that team they'd hired with no dental prior background.
Yep. I remember.
And so moving forward, they actually hired a few more people that came from other industries. They decided, hey, let's work with people that can, cultivate relationships more and then we can teach them the business of dentistry. Yeah. And the way they trained me was I look back on it, and it was actually really smart. That first week on the job, he sent me to Charlotte to work for a full week with Lindy Sykes.
Yeah.
In Charlotte, right? Great guy.
Great dude.
Great guy. And so I think I'm going into this lab to learn in-lab software, scanning, milling, all this process. And I walk into Lindy's door, and he takes me over to the model room. And he's like, this is so-and-so at the model room. I want you to spend the next hour watching her pour up models. And I was like, okay, well, it didn't make sense to me at that time, because that's not what I'm selling. I'm selling this other technology. A couple hours later, they send me over to dye trimming and that. And then we go to lunch, come back, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to get on this machine. He's like, oh, no. Next, I want you to go to, this waxer. I want you to sit with the waxer for an hour or two. And I'm watching this guy wax up crowns, and then we go to investing and casting and divesting and finishing and polishing and all this stuff. And I go through this process over the course of like 3 days. And I'm just sitting with these people, and I'm going nuts, and I didn't understand it. And Lindy just was kind of keeping to himself, letting me go through the process. And I said, Lindy, when am I going to get on the machine? I said, I don't know anything about this technology. And he said, you're not going to be on this machine this week. He goes, you're doing that next week at a different lab. And I said, then what's the purpose of all this? He goes, you're going to learn real quick next week when you get on the machine all the steps you have to go through in an analog traditional workflow. Yep. And you're going to understand the value of what you're selling and all those steps that are eliminated
of digital
and cut out. And looking back on it, that was a perfect way to train me, because then I got to, the light bulb went off real quick, and I'm like, why would anybody not do it this newer way? Right. Yeah. So that's how I learned. And then I went to Jay's lab for a week and co-traveled with other team members and got to have interactions with customers. And so that's how I got onboarded. And that's what ultimately,
I think if you look back at that, you had to learn the culture first.
Yes.
And so Lindy, being a stud, long time, really respected in our industry and stuff, that's kind of important, because if you don't understand us, how can you even walk into our laboratory
and tell you a better way to do it?
Try to tell us that, what you guys have been doing for, I don't know how long.
Yeah. Right.
I'm going to look at you and go, what did you do? AT&T, is that what it was? You need to get out.
Right.
But in reality, that's actually was really brilliant, because they would teach you the culture first. They brought you into, like I said, all these different laboratories, all these these guys that, have a certain mentality, like I said, analog. Listen, I've said this 1,000 times on our show, but my parents were part of that old generation, that old school, and then all of a sudden they have you selling something that is like, you're telling them, hey, everything that get rid of it, because this is the best way, and it's going to cost you this amount, and now you got to come over here. Yeah, that's a hard. I mean, to be honest with you, I think Tom was right. If you were able to sell AT&T, this would be nothing. Like, this would be the easiest thing. But you need to be a competitive person too.
Well, yeah,
and we know all about your competitiveness.
It's there, no doubt. And I grew up like a lot of kids. I played a lot of sports. I played them all. Yeah. Dad.
Tell me a secret that a lot of people might know, maybe, that know him. What's the secret that you used to be a what? I might have been a who in the sport industry?
Well, the sport I pursued the most. I wouldn't say I was a who or a what or an anything. It's
I've Googled you before, bro. Don't even lie.
I'm selling capital equipment and technology now. So obviously it didn't go to the extreme, I guess we'll say. Right?
Nah, but either way, I Googled you, so I know your past. And don't bet on him losing against you if you ever go play golf with him. Okay, just Google him. You'll know.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I found out years later through the interview process at Sirona, and I don't know who it was, but I think one of the interviewees, and it was an interesting process because I was in 4 different rooms over the course of an hour, and I had 15 minutes with 4 different people. Tom was there, Norbert was there, the president of the company was there, and then I think a HR person that I spoke to, and so I think I found out years later that one person may have been skeptical about my background in golf, thinking that I was going to be out away from work all the time, playing and all that stuff. And I get it. For me, golf was never about fun or pleasure or going out with the guys and doing that. That's not why I did it. I did it on a competitive basis. I was always preparing for a certain event, and I had a process that I would go through. And so just going out with the guys and riding around is not. Even still today is not something I enjoy doing.
Not fun.
I prefer the alone time, practicing, preparing, and working towards something. So it did teach me a little bit about the discipline of being prepared and having the competitiveness as well. And so I think athletics is a tremendous path and gateway to especially in our industry to stay competitive and stay hungry and make sure you're bringing value to people and sharing, and also, I've been fortunate. I've worked for, nothing but in the dental business to just amazing types of technology and companies and structures. And so, I've been very fortunate from that aspect.
But I think in a lot of ways, that's where we really started even connecting, because I am a very competitive person, as you know what I mean? It was like, for me, we would talk about this all the time. Like, hey, when you were talking about getting to know Jay and getting to know everybody, for me, when we would go out there and try to, get people to come on to the digital side of things in the laboratories, I remember you used to call me and you used to say, hey, I need you to come out to, Texas or, wherever your territories were. Yeah. And I remember just thinking to myself, like, bro, like, I'm coming out there, but
do not waste my time.
Do not waste my time, because I'm not in it. Like you just said about, the golf. It was the same thing, right? Like, for me, I was in it because I wasn't trying to sit there and tell you, hey, I'm flying out. Now my honorarium is going to be like, $7,000. I need to be in the, the penthouse of this hotel. No, dude, I don't care. We would stay at the same hotels, drink, make videos. And we'll talk about that later on. But, but the bottom line was that competitiveness that I had also, and you had it when we would go out, it was on.
It was game on.
We wanted to be number one. Bottom line. And that's the way I looked at it, and that's the way you looked at it. And I think that's why we were so successful as a team.
Well, and I think it built a trust and a rapport between me and you, because I don't recall exactly what I was paying you back then to.
No, it wasn't much.
It wasn't much. No. I know that. And that's my point, is that you were making, and I would have customers say, well, of course Frank's saying that, you're paying him to say, and I was like, you don't understand how much money he's giving up or losing by not being in his lab, producing work and getting it out the door and working on more premium case type activities. Right. And so, no, I knew that you were in it because you wanted to teach people a better way to do things. In this world, you guys cram, 30 hours in a 24-hour day every single day at work, and it's tough. And so it was a lot of fun when we got started, walking into labs and showing them what we were doing. Of course, we're lugging around a few hundred pounds of equipment, setting it up, calibrating it, doing everything. But at the end of the day, you'd see the light bulb go off, and you'd see people, couples. Yeah. I mean, I remember one vividly. We were in Houston, and we went into Tammy Hood's lab.
Yeah. Right? Till this day, I still talk to her.
Do you? Yeah. So we go in there, and it's she and her husband, and they may have had one other employee. I think it was just the two of them.
I think, if I remember correctly.
And so, we loaded up everything, got it started, and Tammy's not someone I want to waste her time. She's, she will let you know. She's focused. She's driven. I've got a ton of respect for her because she's gonna shoot you straight. And we went in there, and I remember she and her husband were looking at each other like, oh wow, that's interesting. That's because she's also, they have a couple girls, as I recall. They were middle school, high school at the time. And I think, when you provide a solution and a different workflow, big word for you, I know.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, huge.
It changes, it can change someone's life. It can give them more time to do this or that or whatnot. If they choose to use the technology in that way, right? They can also use it to add a lot more work, right?
Yep.
But I remember when we left, we got in the car and we were heading back towards Houston area, and I was like, man, that's the perfect customer that this can affect, that this can help, right?
Exactly.
And she had said, hey, we're going to sleep on it and think about it, and at that time, that's time is an enemy, I guess, in my business, right? The further 100%. Something goes along, the more likely it is that they're going to kind of stray away. And she called us probably 15 minutes after we got in the car, and we were heading down the interstate. And she's like, you know what, guys? I don't need to think about it any further. I'm ready to go. Count me in. Let's do this, right? And so that was a lot of fun for us because that was a great win. She went on to attend a lot of events. And
like I said, till this day, like now she's with ExoCAD. So I actually trained her how to do ExoCAD. I mean, the whole thing. The thing that really goes back to even that story, right? A lot of people when I walk in, that if they didn't know who I was, you knew my story with my parents, and when they got sick, sitting at the bench and all that stuff, and at the end, a lot of people in the beginning they would say, well, yeah, Frankie's married to Sirona, or he's whatever they would say. They could say whatever they wanted to say, but nobody really knew me. But when I went with the reps, they were the ones who actually knew me. And for me, it was so important when we would go into these mom and pop labs, was because if you look at my story and my parents and what they knew how to work, that's all they knew, right? They knew how to work. They knew how to, wake up in the morning, like you said, 30 hours in a 24-hour day, whatever. We would just, I just found a picture of my dad the other day. It said, you post that picture and I'll kick your ass, right? It's him sleeping on the bench like this, right? Yeah. And all these pans around him. And to me, that's what I saw in the industry, right? And that's why it became such a passion for me when it came to digital, because it wasn't so much that I was sitting here saying that analog was bad and that analog was dead or anything like that. For me, it was kind of like, hey, listen, there is another way, right? And when you would call me and say to me, hey, let's go out to Texas, or let's go here, let's go there, especially when you became my rep in California, right, for a little while,
right?
For me, it became sort of like a passion of mine to say it's not about the money, because honestly, I don't want to say how much we were getting paid, but trust me, no, it was more about me coming out there and sort of changing the world, right? Because when we would walk into the Tammy Hoods and we would walk into, all these other laboratories that were mom and pops, the generations of techs in one place, like all I thought about was my family. And then I would think to myself, okay, if we don't change, if we don't look at both of them, like the analog way and the digital way, well, one's going to give at one point, right? Like there's only so much sleeping on the desk that my dad could do.
Right.
But it needed to be that we were looking at this way that was back then hard, right? Because you had to mill a certain way, but you knew that it was going to get better. And if you adopted at that time, you knew that by generations, look at my parents now, right? My parents, they're having fun, they're enjoying, they still are part of the laboratory. But if I wouldn't have given them that,
right,
because I fought for it, Tammy fought for it, right? Look at her today. She's doing great, doing all on X's. She's kicking ass, taking names, because that's how Tammy is, right? But at the end, we got to basically look at our industry as a whole and just make it better for all of us. And that's how I looked at it. I didn't go out there because, I went out there because I wanted to basically get more than what Jay got. You know what I'm saying? Because Jay was my boy, and Mike Sirius and all them. But at the end, when the numbers came down, I wanted to be like number one. I was like, yeah, that's the man right there. You know what I mean? And that's why we were the A team, as we called it. You and Jay were like the C team, maybe. Trey, no. You know what? Jay was B team. Trey was maybe C team. Mike, I don't know. you know the category. You actually know which one's which, right? But at the end, that was the most important thing to me. hey, look, I believed in it. Let's go. Let's roll. I'm all in. Let's do it. And that's how I felt that you were too. And I think that that's why I never felt that you actually wasted my time, because I had gone to certain places where these reps would come in, find out,
Right.
we should call Frankie because, maybe Bolen told him or somebody else told him. And then all of a sudden they would be like, hey, come down to this area or that area. And I'd show up and I think to myself, like, bro, like, really? You brought me here for what? To put me in the books that Frankie came down and we didn't really see any laboratories. We didn't do anything. No. You're in it to win it or don't call me. You know what I mean?
I felt that way not only about your time, but also about the customer's time when we would do events. And they're taking a day away from the lab, and you quickly realize in this industry what a day is worth, what an hour's worth, what a minute's worth, right?
Yeah.
And for them to leave and come to Patterson for the day, or come to a hotel that perhaps we rented out a room or something like that. I wanted to make sure that they were getting the proper value out of their time, just like I wanted to make sure that you were speaking to the right people, right? That were in the market for change and transformation, right? So. And this leads to a really funny story with us, because I would know who's coming ahead of time, right? And I would know if they were more of the corporate side
where this is going.
of the business, and I would know if it was father son coming, father husband wife, mother daughter, whatever it was, right? And we had an event in Louisiana, in the Shreveport area, and I remember. I don't know how many labs we had there. We had probably it was a pretty full room. We had about 10 or 12 labs there in the hotel that we rented, and I think 9 or 10 of them, almost all of them, were family labs. It was your story. It was a story of a lot of labs,
a lot
right?
of laboratories.
And I remember talking to you about what was the plan, what were we going to talk about, and it may sound canned and pre-prepared, but it's actually the most authentic thing you could have done. But I would say, Frank, we've got to, we called it the cry speech, right? And we say that laughing, but it was so genuine. I remember the first time I heard you say it at a different event, and I'm in the back, and all of a sudden everyone's just wiping their face and wiping their eyes with tears. And you told the story about your dad's heart attack at the bench, and that was real, and it resonates, and people understand that, especially in this business, and how much effort and work you put into it. And so I remember saying, hey, this is a room full of family-owned labs, man. I think
that's the story that you need to tell.
It was the story I wanted you to tell, but of course we nicknamed it the cry speech. And so,
because every time I would say it, I would start I would ball up, because
you would well up.
It was a true story that happened.
It was authentic.
It was authentic. It was what it was. It was, and for those that haven't heard it, I'm only Bolen would have to bring this up now, and I'm not gonna cry. Okay, I'm not gonna cry, but
you said that every time right before you did the speech, anyways.
But in reality, look, at the end, it was a true story. It basically, that story was one of the stories that really even changed my life, right? Because growing up in a laboratory, like you were just talking about with your dad, you kind of don't know what's really going on, right? You would get out of school, go to the lab, and then your dad would be working, your mom would be working, and all that stuff. And then sometimes you would grab a hand piece, do this or that. So as you grew up, you didn't really know, but you sort of already became, you were already a lab rat, right? That's what you were. Bottom line, you were just in there, and you knew how to make models, you would play with the plaster, you would do this, you would do that. But once I really got involved, right, my whole life started kind of evolving around the whole entire, lab life, right? And so I was always told, like, look, this is how it is. This is what we do. This is, kind of like the way that the lab world worked. And I remember, my dad, he was the kind of guy that, again, all roads, I always say this, all roads led back to him, right? So if there was Crown and Bridge, there was this, there was that, he was the guy at the end. Yeah. And then, he would look at it and go, I don't like this. And he would change the anatomy of this, or he would do that. And so everything was always there. So he was always the first one there, but he was always the last one to leave, right? And no matter how many employees we had or how many technicians we had, at the end, they still went to him, and then he would, I remember he had his little thing. He'd look up, hey, so and so, come here really quick. Here's what you got to do. And he was a teacher too at the same time, but he put himself in that position where that laboratory was gonna either survive with him, or not survive if he wasn't there.
Right.
So around 10 o'clock in the morning, he was sitting there and he had a heart attack, like out of nowhere. It was like a bomb just dropped inside the laboratory. So, we're all racing off to the hospital and stuff like that. And I remember it like it was yesterday, right? They were taking him away. And when they were taking him away, my mom kind of looks at me and she says, what are we going to do? And all I kept thinking about at that moment was, he'll be okay. Like, no, don't worry, he'll be okay, and this and that. And the next words out of her mouth was, what are we going to do at the lab? You need to go. And all of a sudden I'm like, okay. And I'm taking off, and I land at the laboratory, and all I'm thinking about is like, I'm here, my dad's in the hospital, but we have all these cases that have to go out because it seemed like the laboratory stopped. Like our whole entire family, everything about our family was going to end that day, our business, everything. And I remember, he was gone. He had to go through his surgery. At the end, my man's 80 years old right now, bro. And he's like, he's rolling around here, and, he still dances and he does all that. I mean, it's crazy how well he's doing today. But at that moment, all I remember was thinking to myself, as I was sitting there and now doing what he did, I saw my whole life just kind of go in front of me. Like I saw where I was going to go with my kids, with my own kids. My kids were small. They were 2 years old, 1 year old, 3. She's actually one of the producers. She's like sitting right over there. We don't move these cameras, so you don't know. But to be honest with you, that story, that moment in life changed me forever, because I remember my dad coming back after his surgery and all the things that he had to do. It was about 3 weeks later, and I thought to myself, I need a change in my life.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's all I kept thinking to myself. Oh, when he comes back, things are going to be different. Like we're gonna rely on others. We're gonna be able to learn how to scale. We're gonna do this. We're gonna do that.
And they weren't.
No, man. My man just showed up and he was like, "Hey, get up." And I was like, "Okay."
No, it's an aha moment.
Yeah,
right?
It is that aha moment. I was just sitting there going like, "Wow, okay." So he just had that come to Jesus moment, right?
Right.
And the next thing you know, all of a sudden I'm thinking, okay, well, things are going to change, because it changed for me. Because I just saw my whole life flash, right? I was like, oh shit, that's going to be me, and I would tell that story because at the end, real shortly after, that's when Jeff Youngerman rolled into my lab, and Remo, from San Diego, from Patterson, they rolled into my lab, and all of a sudden I just saw something different. And that's all I needed to see was something different, something that was digital, something that was like, whoa, okay, well, wait a second, there is a different way. Let's do that. And I remember going to my dad and saying to my dad, what about this? And he looked at me and he was like, no, he's stubborn. No. That's.
We should get our dads together.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought when I got in this business that, hey, I'm going to be the first, the only child in the dental industry, and we're going to have so much to talk about. Yeah. But before he up till the time he retired, he never did adopt, CAD CAM, CEREC, some of his best friends worked for Patterson, and he never did buy into it. It just wasn't where it, at that time also, it wasn't quite, we're still talking red cam, maybe getting into blue cam type of time
Early
frame.
adapters were studs back then, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. And he's looking at me like, well, what do you mean full contour zirconia? He goes, PFM, David. That PFM gold crowns. That's that's what he did. And so when I'm talking about digital workflows and 3D printing with him, it's just a different time. It's a different way of doing it. So it's pretty interesting the time. Looking back, the day he walked out and the day I walked in. Yeah. It's two totally different conversations.
Exactly, and that's what it was. We might have called it the crying speech, but in reality, it was true. It was what happened, and at the end, I wanted something to change our lives, not just me, my family, the industry that I love, right? And that every time I was called out, that's what I would think about. It wasn't about, what you were going to pay me or whatever, it was about really just letting people know, like, hey, there's a different way. And you brought up Tammy, and it's 100% true. When I walked in there, that's what I thought about, because they had 2 little ones. Now I know I think they're even at a high school. I don't even know if they're in college.
No, they're out of college now.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my God, I am so old. But because I remember it like being like yesterday, and it's not, it's like, but yeah, no, those were great times. Listen, our I would say our Sirona days and our Dentsply days were great. When it came to that way of doing things, things have changed. Of course, you then moved on and you went to Stratasys, which was funny, right? Because I always sat there and I told you, Jeff Youngerman was the one who sold me my very first mill, right? And all of a sudden he walks in and he looks at me and he's like, "Bro, is on with Stratasys now, so you're going to be printing?" And I would be like, "What about no,
yeah.
Listen.
We moved on.
Yeah, we moved on. Yeah, and pulls out the contract where we're going to be, doing, printing. But I do remember about Stratasys, one thing that that I would say, and we just kind of talked about this, a while back ago, or a little while ago. During our early adaption days, right? We used to make the models out of those blocks of wood or whatever they were.
Oh, off the MCXL.
Off the MCXL.
Yeah,
remember that? Yeah. It would look like somebody threw up in there. You know what I'm saying?
Wooden wet models.
Yeah. So I would look at my dad and go, "Dad." My dad would take the crown and he was like, "No, I'm trying to adjust the crown to the model." And I go, No.
The crown's fine.
The crown's fine. The model, don't trust it at all. And I remember those days, but I do remember, that all of a sudden, he shows up and he tells me this. But at one point, I was, at that time of my life, I was really trying to convince doctors, like, "Hey, docs, you got to go digital. You got to do this. You got to do that. We can do this. We can do that." It wasn't so much just about, inlays, onlays, single unit crowns, a veneer. No, I would have these events, and I would bring them over and I would say, "Look, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do that." And I used to go to all the Patterson branches across the United States and invite doctors, and I was gone like, half the year just talking digital with the doctors. And I remember I needed something, right, that I can feel relieved in my laboratory as, okay, if I mill this and I put it on this, it's going to basically like fit like a glove. And at that time, Jeff walks in and he goes, No, I got the solution for you. I go, "You've always been complaining about these models and this and that." I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "I got this printer." And everybody at that time were starting to adapt to, other printers that were like kind of cheap. They were like toys, basically.
Right.
But this one was kind of like more industrial, right?
Sure.
The 260, right? And I remember he coming in and he was like, "No, this is like the printer." I'm like, "All right, let me take a look at it." And he printed some models and I was like, "Wow, like this is some shit right here." Like this. These things fit like these things are nasty. He was like, "No, it prints out to like," I forget what number the microns were. I don't even know. Do you know the microns for the 260 these days?
They were also in that 18 to 20 on the Z-axis height layer.
Bottom line was that printer was probably the best unknown secret in the planet, right? The way I looked at it as a laboratory, no. This is what I need. I don't give a shit how much it costs. My friends would call me up and be like, "Dude, what are you doing? Like, you're buying a what printer for how much to do what models? Are you crazy?" I was like, "Bro, listen to me. Bottom line is, this is what I need so that I can bring confidence to my clients, because if I'm confident that whatever I milled and whatever I did fits on that model and everything is good and the margins are nice and clear, it brings confidence." And that's why I purchased it. And that was my introductory. Believe it or not, a lot of people ask me, what was the very first printer that I ever bought? Yeah, I have a few. I got so many printers that I don't even know these days. But that was the very first printer that I bought that really made me confident in any digital workflow that was going to move on from that point forward.
And we're talking 12 years ago, and it's still sitting right over there.
Yeah. No, it's right there. Yeah, and we still do models on it. It runs models every single day.
You don't see technology last that long.
You don't. And that's the reality behind it, And so once I saw that, I knew that the leader, right? Again, I'm the kind of person that I'm all in. All of a sudden I see something, I'm like, oh, let's go. Let's go. Let's do this. And I just wanted to get more and more and more, and to be honest with you, a lot of people, still to this day, they ask me about, Stratasys and what we use and what we do and stuff like that. But bottom line is that, he came in, he convinced me, I did it. And then all of a sudden you came in. Right?
Yeah.
And you were never able to convince me anything to buy besides
a sintering furnace.
A sintering furnace.
Yes. We're in a palace full of technology. I was your rep for many years, and I think you bought a $12,000 sintering furnace from me.
Yeah. But you were never really my rep. You were always the backup guy that would show up when all of a sudden the rep left.
I worked with you during the most inopportune times.
Exactly. Right? If not, no. Because now, what do I have now? I got a shitload of shit.
Yeah.
But no, so then you went into Stratasys, and now you've been there for how long now?
I've been there coming up on 9 years.
Wow.
9 years. I was actually, and what brought me over, I was at an event in North Carolina. I was at one of Norbert's experience events,
the experience. Well, we had the experience. We had the in-lab summits.
Summit. Yeah. We were at a summit, staying right there in that little community of Charlotte, right? Ainsley or Arsley or whatever it was called. Had the restaurants, and we had just taken out 80, 90 people to eat, and we're all walking back up to the hotel. My phone rings, and again, another dear friend, colleague of mine at Sirona. Barry Diener.
Barry Diener
calls me.
Now you want to talk about competitive, bro?
Hyper competitive, right?
Yeah.
And I remember the first year, I clipped him on top for sales for the company, and he threw a fit. Yeah. I mean, he was having none of it. So that was fun. I mean, we had great banter back and forth about that kind of stuff. And so, but he calls me and he says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Actually, Barry, I'm with some customers right now. I'm just walking up to the hotel. We're just wrapping up dinner." And he says, "Hey, I need to talk to you when you get a minute." He goes, "You're going to leave Sirona and you're going to come work for Stratasys." And at that time,
that's Barry.
At that time, things were really going well at Sirona. We had all these events. We had tremendous support and resources. And Norbert and Tom were, they had the machine rolling and were giving us the opportunity to really be successful, right? And so I was like, "I don't think so, man." And he goes, No. He goes, "You're coming," And it took a few weeks, and we got to, one thing led to another, and had to also convince, the Sirona life was a culture. It was a family. It was a community.
Oh, hell yeah.
And that goes into my family, right?
Yeah.
Amber would travel to all of the events.
Yeah, me and my wife, Allison.
The Vegas. I mean, they talk fairly regularly, right? And so she would go to all these events. And I remember her, me bringing up the idea of leaving. And this was after the Dentsply Sirona merger, right? Mm-hmm. And a few people were starting to kind of, go different directions. And I thought, the next evolution of the digital journey is 3D printing.
Exactly.
We could see that. And there's just, in my mind, there was just no more impressive technology than jetted technology that we offered at Stratasys. And so, but I had to do some convincing with her as well, because she wanted to, wanted to make sure that she wasn't, because again, it was more than customers. It was very personal with us, with Sirona, and with
it was a family. No matter how you looked at it, it was a family.
Right. So, no, but it all worked out. And, I get to wake up every day and, forget dental. We get to, our company's in automotive and aerospace and education and government and the things that we can print are just amazing. We bring people to our facilities for dental specific events, but we've got all the toys laid out of things we've printed and it's it's fascinating.
Yep. What's cool about that is, again, I went there the first time and I remember going out there and thinking to myself, wow, that's a motor, that's an engine, that's this, that's that. I'm like, okay, what does all this have to do with dental? And they were like, "Oh, no, but we can make these amazing models." And I was like, "Yeah, it was on." And the first thing that I ever printed was actually a little G.I. Joe. No, it was a Halo. It was a Halo because that was the first thing that we ever printed. So they would print it and be like, "Okay, that's how they tested it out." But I remember it had moving parts and all this stuff. I was like, "Man, this is the shit right here." But But at the end, what's really cool, and you've been there for, like you said, so many years and stuff, that was something that if we look back and we think milling to where printing is today, you're 100% right. At one point, milling sort of was like, because at that point, I was milling dentures. Okay, I remember that like it was yesterday. We would mill out all these dentures, and then when we would mill out these dentures, like we would have to put a puck. Sometimes it would take like 8 hours, because when digital dentures hit the market, I just said, okay, I'm gonna invest at DS World. I had a big backdrop, right? And said, digital dentures.
Any questions?
Exactly. It said,
I
any
remember.
questions? Yeah. Next thing I know, I'm bombarded. Hey, let's, what about digital dentures? How do you scan it? How do you do this? Next thing I know, I come back to the laboratory and man, all these cases are starting to come in through, Sarah Connect. I want to try a digital denture. They would scan it. And all I could think is like, oh shit. Okay. So now I need to start milling this stuff. When we put the puck in, it would be like, so it would take 7 hours, 8 hours. I'm like,
yeah, it wasn't scalable.
Yeah, you know what it was? It brought me back to the days, where I was sleeping at the lab, right? Because we would go, the techs would leave, and all of a sudden, me and Allison would look at each other, and we're like, all right, so we have dinner around 7. We can put a puck in. It says it's going to take about like 3 hours left. Okay, so then we'll drive by around 9 o'clock
and put a new one in.
Put a new one in, and then we'll change out the pucks and we'll do this and that. And so it became like a weekend thing for us. We would do our thing around making sure that the mills were running and running and running, right? And but we had to, again, how do we talk about confidence, right? I need to bring confidence to the dentist to know that we can do this digitally, right? So whatever I needed to do, I had to do, right? And that goes back to my Stratus thing, right? Because if we look at digital dentures today, two parts that I want to talk about, especially when it comes to Stratus, their printers, is that I still remember the day that I walked into, I don't remember if we were at the LMT, and I remember walking in, and I think you were in the background, and you were standing next to this really cool, it looked like a refrigerator, but it was blue, right? It was a J5, right?
J5, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember you saying it, and you saw me. And you went, hey, come here. I got to show you something. Dude, I whirled in there. You were showing me like digital dentures. You were showing me this. You were all in one piece, whatever colors I want and this and that. And I remember just sitting there going like, wait, hold up. You're just blowing my mind. Are you telling me right now that I could print, a model? I could print, a surgical guide. I could do this. And you're like, yeah. What did I say to you right there?
Sign me up.
Sign me up right there.
Yeah.
You know why? Because I knew that the technology that I basically was able to grow my business behind when it came to the 260, which brought the confidence in the real big cases and all these different things, because I had a model that I was able to really test things on. Instead of, grabbing that crown, putting it in that box, opening and closing, I knew that at that moment, oh man, all on X, it was on my radar, right? Because I knew that I needed to be able to now start offering to my doctors a solution, but I needed the confidence, and I was able to, create these models and these surgical guides and all these different things, stackable guides, with such precision that I knew that at that moment, okay, I need that printer, right? And it built my All on X business.
But going back to your journey with digital dentures from milling, and you tell the story about how you and Allison, it boggles my mind that that we have to be, I consider maybe being slaves to our technology, right? And you have to go to dinner, we can swing by, change out a puck, put on another one, and that's not the intent of what any of us are trying to do, right? We're trying to let the technology work for us to be able to scale for us, and but not work for it. And so, the solution worked great with the milling. I mean, it was very accurate. It looked great. Had all the properties you want, right? But the fact that when people go to Dent Supply Sirona World and they go to your booth, it's going to blow up. So you've got to have something that can grow with you, and that's not going to go back to the days of of becoming a slave to that work, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the fun part of what we do. So many people will come to our booth who've never seen our technology, and they're like, hey, is that a cure unit? They see the blue light and the thing's spinning around in there, and I'm like, no, that's a printer, and the thing's the size of a like an extra large pizza, right? So I mean, you can fit 30, 40, 50 parts on there at one time, walk away, come back the next day, and you've got all these parts done.
Yeah. We have great success. I mean, like once we leave for the day, it comes back. It's ready to go. And going back to what you just said too, it's true, because if we look at our journey, or we look at the everything, or the evolution of everything, right? Digital, for me, it was always the demand that I would put onto the companies, right? I need this. I need this, and I need this fast. In my head, I want it, right? We just had that conversation about, when it comes to jetting, right? It needs to have a certain, thickness to be able to produce this material and that material. And I said this 1,000 times, where I'm like, oh, I want this, and I have to then all of a sudden think to myself, like, hey, okay, I got to be patient, because I got to be as patient as I was when I was making them bad boys out of wood. Right. And I made it work, and then I had to understand the materials before I jumped, and make sure that everything was done properly for the success of each material. Because when I hear people say certain things about oh well, this material or that material, because this material breaks and that material doesn't do this and that, I just always think to myself, well, it's because you're not using it properly, right? To be honest, you're not, because we have great success with a lot of different materials and a lot of different things, but we like to understand it before we put it out there 100%, right? And that's sort of like the understanding that people need to sort of look at when it comes to jet printing, right? If I'm saying it right, and DLP, right? Is that you don't compare the two, because they're not even close to each other, in my opinion, because they print. Once they print something, but what this is printing and what this is printing is two different beasts.
Well, what's unique about our organization is we sell 5 different technologies within our portfolio. It just happens to be that jetting is
the king,
is the best suited for the precision and accuracy that dental demands. But we've also had the last few years a DLP unit. I haven't sold it. I've had it hasn't made sense for my customers and based on their needs and their wants, because you guys are looking for solutions. You're not looking for a printer. You're looking for an end solution.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And you're looking for a workflow, and you're looking for things to be clean and eliminate mess, eliminate hazardous waste, eliminate all that stuff that
alcohol.
Unfortunately, it's not discussed enough, I think, in our industry.
It doesn't.
That the fact that there are options out there that eliminate IPA, that eliminate all those alcohol baths, eliminate post-light curing, and so I think what's exciting for our organization, and I know we're not going to talk a lot about it, but I want to we've gone through some restructuring and some reorganization recently. Yeah. And, now we've got Chris Cabot on board as our global vice president over Stratasys Dental. And I think a lot of people know his name and who he is. And he's got just a ton of experience with all 3D printing additive technologies. He's been doing this, since really right out of high school or college. He's dedicated so much of his life towards additive, and been with multiple organizations and tremendously respected. And he knows all the technologies, but he also knows the market and what they're looking for, because he was my customer just last week, and now he's the director of our business unit.
Now he's your boss,
and so I can't be more excited to work with him. But he's got such a strong pulse on the market and what they need and what they want, and so really excited about what's ahead for Stratasys.
But that's what's needed, though, because as a customer, all I could do is sit back and be like, Bolen, when am I going to get this? Bolen, when am I going to get that? This I need, high impact. I need this. I need that. And to really have somebody in the forefront that's going to understand, only because I've been in meetings with my man, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so, when he sits there and he goes, hey, this is what we need. Like, what's up? You know what I mean? Like, he understands our industry and what we need. across the board. And I think that, now that you're saying this, that's pretty cool. Hopefully, this doesn't air before. Because if it's so good, it might air tomorrow. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Edit. But at the end, no, this is that's great news, because I'm going to say it again, as a customer, as a very long, I have 4 Stratuses in here. You know what I mean? We do TrueDent, we do, hell, all of our surgical guides, we do a shitload of all-on-X's that, again, we would have not been able to grow our business, in all-on-X if it wasn't for the partnership that I have with, or not even the partnership. I'm not even going to use the word partnership. I'm going to say with the confidence that I have in Stratuses. You know what I mean? And again, it goes back to whatever. I don't get paid to say this. I'm saying this because I feel it. I believe it, because I needed those things to happen in my life to get me to where our laboratory is today, to get me to where we stand today, and to get me to where we want to be tomorrow.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I need to be able to understand it 100% that if I'm partnering up with the company, they're not going to bail out on me. You know what I mean?
Right.
I want to make sure that they understand what I need and what I want as a customer, right? And then again, as a friend, I get to, yell and scream and all this stuff. And then I got to go back and go, oh, okay, I understand it. Because you know what? I got buddies that have, equipment, and they call me and they complain to me and they say this. I go, hey, dude, I got the same complaint, bro. Let's all get together and go burn something. No. But,
I got nothing.
He's got nothing. Yeah, you got nothing.
That's part of the job is
It is what it is, bro.
You may have the coolest technology, but there's always something.
The coolest.
There's always the next thing that people want, and that's what we're always chasing.
As humans,
right?
we're impatient.
Right?
That's all there is to it.
We're always chasing.
Yeah, we're always chasing
the next thing. And
but to be honest, it is the shit. That's all I got to say. And to be honest, when I hear these things, moving forward, it just gets me more excited, because like I said, I believe that, I want to listen. I have nothing bad to say about any company, any printer, anything that I've ever purchased, anything. I've spent, listen, I got a CT scanner, okay, in my laboratory. Okay. I have an operatory in my laboratory. I got so much equipment that I sit there sometimes thinking to myself, not even in softwares, right? In softwares alone, I don't even know. But I could sit here in front of you and tell you straight out, every single one is important to me for what I need it for. You see what I'm saying?
I do.
Yeah.
Listen, if a customer comes to me,
yeah,
and specifically on the clinical side,
yeah.
Now there are doctors out there that they don't care.
Yeah, they don't care
what the investment is.
Yeah.
They just want the best, right?
Yeah.
And if that's what they want, then that's what I'll give them. But if they call me and say, "Man, I want to do surgical guides, and I know that my surgical guide provider uses your technology. I want to bring it in house," and we'll have that discussion. And 9 times out of 10, I advise them that this is probably not the right technology for them. It doesn't make sense if you're doing a couple here and there, right? This is production environment, and so
we just had this conversation with a doctor that just called me up while you got here,
right?
And he asked me the same question, and it's true. I said, "Oh no, I have Stratuses, and then
you and I have been in 100+ labs together before."
Yeah.
We go in there focused on our solution, on what we're there to talk about. We don't ever talk about other companies. I've got tremendous respect for all of them. It's a very competitive market, and I appreciate that. But I focus on what we have and what we do. And I remember when you brought up Jeff Youngerman earlier, when he was with Zahn, a few years. Years back,
I bought some Desktop Health and also Envisions.
And I had we were at the LMC West meeting.
A lot of shit from him, bro.
A lot. You bought a lot from him. Yeah. You keep reminding me. And,
I know. I don't know what happened.
But I remember a lab came up just starting their digital dentistry journey.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Man, we just started. We bought this software, and we're getting a couple cases a week, and I need something to be able to do some models and guides and da-da-da." And I just said, "You know what? Why don't you come with me?" And I took him over to the Zahn booth and introduced him to Jeff. Because at that point, at the end of the day, I want them to have a good experience with their process. And it just didn't make sense at that time for them to be having a discussion with us because at the end of the day, it wasn't going to work, for them. And I knew that. So I took him over there and, had him advise on what was the best thing to get started on. And then as business grows and things, start flowing better, then let's have a discussion because, there are some tremendous advantages.
No, I mean, listen, we sell a lot of dentures and we sell TrueDent and we sell Lucitone. Right. TrueDent has his home. Lucitone has his own. And those are the only 2 dentures as of today that we sell. We're going to add another one soon. But at the end, everybody has their home. When the doctor says, "Hey, I want this," or "I want TrueDent for X, Y, and Z," then we do it. If we want Lucitone, then we do that. At the end, like I said, I'm not one because every single printer I bought has a material that it prints, and that's all I want. Yeah, do I want to sit here and say, why do I need so many printers if I have a printer like a J5 that can print multiple materials, right? But then I have to step back and understand, okay, the technology is awesome, but this is what it could do. Right. And then go to David. Okay, David, all right, fine. Let's talk next month. When's it coming?
And then I tell you to tap the brakes and be patient and exciting times ahead, right?
Right. But that's what it is. It's always been exciting times ahead, right? Because if you go down the journey, the exciting times have been. We just told the whole entire story about when we were at Sirona, what we did, how we did it, blah blah blah, and look where we're at today. Making dentures in one shot, adding veins on it, changing the colors, doing all these things, and I can go home and I don't have to set it up differently. You know what I mean? I don't have
come back to 25.
Yeah, to 25 in one shot. I mean, to be honest, and that's real. That's reality, right? But again, I'm excited to see what's going to happen with Stratasys moving forward, and again, I'm excited to see what's going to happen, with our friendship moving forward too, because we've been friends for so long, and we were only able to tap into a couple of the stories.
Well, and like I said at the beginning of this, if it wasn't for me not knowing anything about the dental business, it wouldn't. We wouldn't have the same relationship because I relied on you and the other guys to help me out, and I'm no different than anyone else when it comes to buying stuff. I don't inherently I don't really care for salespeople. Right, right. I mean, that's the truth. I don't. If I go buy a car, those guys come running out and they keep telling me how great whatever it is I'm looking at, how great it is, and how wonderful it is, and I don't want to hear that. I'd rather talk to a peer who owns that car and tell me about it, or what do you think? And dental labs are no different. They want to hear from their peers, and that's the way I operated my business when we got started. Is I brought you along, and I just stayed out of the way, and I let you do your thing, and that was my strategy, because I knew, dental lab owners thought the same way I did about other things. Right?
I think everybody does, right? Like that's just like the train of thinking, because at the end, you have to do a job that means you have to sell something to keep your job. If you don't sell something, who knows what happens?
But right? we all sell something.
Exactly. No, 100%.
You sell something.
That's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
That's what I was about to say. What am I doing?
Right.
Right. I'm looking at you going like, "Rrr," and then I'm looking at, and somebody else is looking at me going, "Rrr," and then that person's looking at somebody else. "Rrr." You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's the reality of where we're at. But again, it's partnership, it's friendships, it's long lasting relationships that really, really, speak, about the products and also about the companies a lot of times, right? And it's sad, sometimes companies, all of a sudden disappear and stuff, but it has nothing to do with the people that are there, right? Because people, I believe in something, and I'm actually really excited. Next week, I'm going to Vegas. I'm going to go see. I jumped onto this thing called Entrepreneur Level Up, right? And Marcus Lemonis is going to be there. There's going to be the guy from Shark Tank. There's going to be all these different people there. But I'm really excited to go see Marcus Lemonis, right? Because when I was younger, he used to have a show called The Apprentice. And no, I'm sorry, not The Apprentice. That
was a different guy.
Wrong billionaire. wrong dude. Sorry, my bad. He had a show called The Prophet.
Prophet, yeah.
Yeah. So The Prophet, I started watching it like early on, right?
And that's where he comes into failing businesses and helps take them over. And
but he had this model, like that this motto. And remember, I don't speak English very well, so don't make fun of me. Motto. Motto. And all I kept thinking about was, my man says these words to somebody, and he walks in and he says, I believe in the 3 P's, people, process, and product, right? And that's what he lives off of. The reason why he would help a business is because he had to believe in the people first. And then once he believed in the people, then he had to look at the processes, right? And then he would look at the products.
Right.
And if all 3 were perfect, then everything was.
And it's no different in our business.
It isn't.
It's except the process is, you replace it with workflow.
Exactly.
Right.
I use it. I mean, honestly, when it came to workflows, I remember Sasha Dervinesi, and we were flying. I just saw a picture online that popped up. We were flying, and I keep telling Sasha to come down here, but Sasha. I'm telling him, like, bro, we're gonna have this conversation.
I bet he'll be here.
Oh, he will.
I bet he'll be here.
No, he will be. The problem is that he decided to move all the way across the other side of the United States.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, he doesn't live in California no more.
Oh.
So, but long story short, I remember I was flying to Mexico with Sasha. Sasha Dervinesian is the owner of Harvest Dental. So we were flying out to Mexico, and I'm sitting there talking to him, and my man is like in branding, he's like a sick human, right? My man, he's sick, and all I gotta say is, we were sitting there, we were talking, and he looks at me and he's like, "You're like this workflow guy," and I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "Yeah, dude, like everything that you look at, you always say, oh, okay," because that's what he was talking about, his own products, right? I would look at his products and I go, "Oh man, you know what? We can do this with it. We can do that with it. All we have to do is just create that workflow. We scan over here, we do this, we do that, boom, and then now we have this product and we can do this." Next thing I know, he's like sitting there looking at me, and he's like, "Look," grabs a piece of paper and he's like, "Okay, this is your logo. This is this is that. We got to put the AA in there." Everybody always goes like, "What the hell AA stands for?" It's Acosta and Acosta, from the Acosta family.
Right.
So father to son, So then he makes a circle. He puts the this right here. And then all of a sudden he puts on, and he goes, "You're a digital design because you design." And then he's like, this is like 10 minutes into this whole thing, right? Just writing it down. Then he goes, a digital workflow laboratory, right? But at the time, we were big on CEREC, right?
Right.
And so, because 90% of my customers
all
were
CEREC all the time.
All CEREC all the time.
Yeah.
So then he looks at me and he's like, no. He's all, "A CEREC workflow laboratory." And then he goes, "Boom. Here, this is now your brand."
My first job, we go back to those yellow pages.
Yeah.
Businesses in every industry would put AA or AAA as their name of their business, because when you went to that industry, for example, you went to bail bonds, it was AAA bail bonds, because they would be the first in line in the phone book because of the alphabet, right? So
had nothing to do with
nothing to do with anything other than getting first in line and being seen.
No,
just another way to market.
Yeah,
right?
Ours was, Acosta and Acosta. That's what it was. It was AA.
Yeah, yours was authentic.
Authentic. It was real.
AA,
yeah. My dad, my parents, or my family has owned a couple different labs, right? We had, True Shade. We had Acosta Dental Lab at one point. We had in different states and stuff. We owned all these different, laboratories, but this one right here was the first one that we really had a brand to it, right?
Yep.
And when the merger happened and things kind of changed, back then, when it came to CEREC, we were only receiving from CEREC doctors. We weren't receiving from 3Shape doctors. We didn't have we didn't have doctors that were anything but, CEREC. And it wasn't because nobody was, I got accused so many times of, "Oh, you're in bed with it." No, it had nothing to do with it. It was just, I liked the CEREC doctor because I saw that they had a community that, that understood the workflow and understood everything. And that's where I wanted to play, right? That became my customers. Not just my customers, they became my partners. Then they became my friends. Then it became that community. And
but like any smart entrepreneur, you adapted, right? And you opened up to 3Shape, to ExoCAD, to other workflows, other scanners, and that's what you have to do. It's no different than going from the analog world to the digital world.
100%.
You've got to move, and you got to flow, and you've got to be nimble, and that's how you're going to be successful, right?
100%. So that kicked it off. But going back to what you just said, Yeah, that's exactly what you had to do with digital dentures, right? Like one of the biggest, transitions, that's happening today is digital dentures, right?
Right.
The doctors that don't understand it, and then they're like, okay, but this material or that material or whatever, at the end, digital dentures has a workflow, right? Analog dentures is the workflow for analog. They have that. Now take those two and now put it together, and now you created something that maybe is hybrid kind of deal, right? Like maybe it's a little bit analog, a little bit digital, and at the end we just need those printers that you'll press a button and then it just prints something with veins and colors and all that good stuff, which is what you have. And I'm very excited, and I can't wait till the future because I'm still waiting soon. I'm excited, bro. Listen, I'm excited that you actually told us about what's coming. With your whole entire shift in Stratasys. I'm excited that you're here because you flew all the way from Texas, and I have to like tell you to come over here all the time, but whatever. I never go to Texas anyways, but
well, as long as you keep making major changes to the lab, I'll keep coming.
Oh, there you go.
This is impressive. And you've got a whole education center here. So for those who have not been to, AA education centers and taking courses and taking classes, you need to come out here because
it's fun.
You learn something, and that's what's beautiful about the dental community is we share. There's no secrets.
Exactly, bro. And that's where we're at.
Yeah, more and more labs adopt, more doctors adopt. It just helps. It helps everything all the way down to the inpatient, right? So,
100%.
That's what's fun about what we do.
And again, I look forward to the future, brother. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you having me.
Hey, no,
I appreciate you.
This is going to be great. I'll talk to you soon. We'll talk again probably in a couple of months.
We will.
Yeah, because I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of exciting stuff.
Looking forward to it.